Hi, this is Max Rempel. I will talk about DNA resonance and telepathy. Telepathy is a communication between individuals that goes directly from mind to mind, without the use of physical means such as sound, gestures, phone, internet, and so on. Typically, telepathy is consensual. Two individuals consent to talking to each other telepathically. Telepathy is one of many psychic phenomena studied by parapsychology, which is part of metaphysics. Related phenomena are mind reading, remote viewing, seeing the future, telekinesis, mediumship, channeling, psychic healing, and others. The reason I'm focusing on telepathy is that it is easy to measure, it was recently popularized, and it has a great potential to heal society. How can telepathy heal society? First, mind reading prevents deception, and telepathy is easier for kind people. Scientific research on telepathy dates back over 100 years. Carl Jung researched telepathy especially in dreams. He said in 1933 letter, "The existence of telepathy in time and space is still denied only by positive ignoramuses." Here are a few starting points on telepathy reading. Powell documented exceptional telepathic abilities in non-speaking autistic individuals. Powell, Radin, and Sheldrake tested telepathy through controlled experiments. Great evidence comes from dream telepathy experiments by Ullman and Krippner in the 70s. Sleeping subjects received telepathic messages sent by remote awake participants. Strong evidence also comes from lab studies of average people. Large groups were tested under controlled conditions in many studies. These show modest effects but high statistical significance, and this provides compelling proof of telepathy. Some individuals possess exceptional telepathic abilities. They can transmit and receive information with high precision. This research exists but hasn't yet entered mainstream scientific journals. For diligent investigators, the telepathy tapes provides initial evidence. Further investigation reveals talented telepaths who demonstrate remarkable accuracy. The Telepathy Tapes is an audio podcast that has been airing since September 2024. It explains, in accessible forms, the research on telepathy and the prevalence of high-level, high-precision telepathy among autistic individuals. I've researched telepathy since 2009 and had personal controlled observations that convinced me of its reality. So I believe the telepathy research of Jung, Radin, Sheldrake, and Powell is correct. Thanks to public awareness awakened by Kai Dickens, I hope that stronger evidence will emerge soon. Therefore, I will focus on potential mechanisms, assuming remote telepathy is real. Non-speaking autistic individuals communicate remotely with high precision through telepathy. This telepathy works across any distance with accuracy and ease. Telepathic autists form a telepathic network. From the prevalence of non-speaking autism, I estimate approximately 1 million individuals worldwide possess these telepathic abilities. These telepaths sometimes teach telepathy to normal neurotypical parents and teachers. One of the most fascinating observations is that some teachers now conduct lessons for autists in silence. Telepathy and remote viewing tests were conducted in Faraday cages, underground, and even in submarines, underwater, where classical fields can't penetrate. Yet the information passes through all barriers. So we are not dealing with electromagnetic waves of sound. These are subtle, non-local phenomena. There are two types of telepathy, low and high efficiency. Low efficiency telepathy can be detected in normal, neurotypical people. Normal people are called neurotypical to reduce judgment of abnormal people who are called neurodivergent. Telepathy was measured in normal people in many controlled studies, and normal people can barely communicate telepathically. But considering the large number of tests, subjects, and studies, the statistical evidence for telepathy is highly significant. Now I will bring DNA resonance into the picture. DNA is not acting by itself in resonance. It exists as a solution of DNA and water. But it is not only water, it is DNA, water, and proteins, which together form chromatin, the substance of chromosomes made up of histones. So negatively charged DNA, positively charged histones, and water are the main players. This chromatin structure is very dynamic. It dances in the living cell constantly. One of the main points is that I believe DNA resonance plays a huge role both in morphogenesis and the work of the mind. DNA is a very material polymer. The average adult body contains about 300 grams of DNA. Nearly each cell of our body contains 6 picograms of DNA in a nucleus, and it is dissolved in water and exists in a very concentrated solution of water and proteins. There is 1% of DNA within the nucleoplasm, and the remaining 19% is proteins. Chromosomes in living cells are constantly folding and refolding, so it is a continuous dance that follows a very specific pattern. Since DNA and proteins are highly charged electrically, this dance creates a complex dance of electromagnetic fields. Moreover, DNA folding is sequence-specific, so DNA sequence controls the folding and refolding. Since DNA sequence is very stable, it serves as a blueprint and a crystallization seed for refolding and through that to the dance of electromagnetic patterns. Electromagnetic waves and chromosome dynamics. Next, I will explain how the cells of the body are connected in a single unified electromagnetic vibrational network. There is a continuous conversion between dynamic electromagnetic waves and dynamic chromatin structure. This is strongly affected by a permanent, unchanging DNA sequence. And there is a reverse process where the folded chromosome structure is converted into a dynamic wave pattern. In other words, there are two conversions, a wave pattern to a spatial pattern and a spatial pattern into a wave pattern. I believe this is how the cell thinks, through constantly refolding chromosomes. Consider also insights from traditional Chinese medicine, which proposes that fascia functions like a fiber optic network, transmitting signals throughout the body. I suggest that from microtubules through the cell wall, the signals are conducted to the fiber optic guides, which are made of collagen, and the collagen fibers form a network that is the fascia network. By this mechanism, the DNA throughout the body is linked into a unified vibrational system. In this interconnected vibrational system, DNA sequence controls morphogenesis and health. In addition to morphogenesis, DNA directly participates in consciousness. Building on Stuart Hameroff's ideas, we propose that microtubules also transmit vibrational signals within neurons and between neurons. Publicly available microphotographs show that microtubules extend from the nucleus all the way to the synapses, illustrating their role in transmitting signals throughout neurons. This vibrational electromagnetic signal needs to cross the synaptic gap, and neurotransmitters in that gap modulate this vibrational function. Psychoactive substances have a huge effect on how the brain works. So here you can appreciate the idea by Richard Alan Miller that psychoactive substances change the resonance properties of the synaptic cleft. This allows us to see how the DNA of the body and the DNA of the brain contribute to the work of the mind. The DNA has a perfect size for being a mediator between the quantum world and the classical world. The width of DNA is 2 nanometers, which is the borderline between the classical world and the quantum world. The molecular structures within the DNA are small enough to be governed by quantum properties. These properties include delocalization, superposition, quantum tunneling, quantum entanglement, Heisenberg uncertainty, and Schrödinger's quantum wave description. Moreover, DNA exchanges protons with the surrounding water, and it is a collective structure of DNA, water, and proteins that is oscillating and exchanges delocalized protons, which form proton wires. In my model, DNA is a perfect thinking element of the mind, which combines the properties of the physical mind bound to time and space, and the intuitive mind, which is timeless. In telepathy, classical brain wave oscillations, which are physical mind thinking, are converted to DNA oscillations, because DNA is a part of unified oscillation network of the body. And then through the timeless property of DNA, there is a non-local transfer of information from one telepath to another within a pair. I also use this model to explain the specificity of the transfer. Why is information transferred specifically within the telepathic pair and is not sent or received by all other people? The collective DNA vibration of the body allows specific message targeting. The receiver receives the message only from the sender and vice versa. The genomes of the telepathic pair come into resonance and allow transmission. It is helped by the fact that all people are genetically related. In fact, we differ only by 0.1% of DNA, but these differences help specific targeting. In other words, each individual has a unique genomic sequence, which results in a unique vibrational pattern. This unique DNA signature allows for targeted information transfer, ensuring that communication occurs specifically between the intended individuals. I don't imply that resonance happens using classical electromagnetic waves, because telepathy can work at very long distances and pass through electromagnetic shields. So we are talking about non-local phenomena. So I need to explain how subtle waves can be captured by dancing chromosomes. Essentially, we have a constant restructuring system within a nucleus, which is mediated by water, DNA, and proteins. And these are constantly structuring and restructuring. And that makes it easy for very weak forces of the morphic field to direct this restructuring. To understand the mechanisms of telepathy, we need to look deeper into the concept of consciousness. And for that, we need to start with the idea of free will. To understand free will, we need to realize in which circumstances free will is expressed. If a person has unlimited time, unlimited information, and clear desires, then a choice will be obvious in every challenge. So then it is not free will, it is an algorithmic calculation. Free will typically happens when a person has limited time and limited information, and has to choose between alternatives freely, intuitively, without having full information and full picture. Therefore, time flow is absolutely necessary for the experience of free will. Our free will and ego exist only because time flow drags us forward. We wouldn't be able to experience making choices, especially free choices, if we weren't forced to make them by the time drag. The time drag is created by asymmetrical biochemical processes such as cellular respiration, burning food inside our cells. This slow fire creates an asymmetry in time and thus an experience of time drag. Another necessary insight for researchers is the primacy of consciousness. It looks like there is a fundamental natural law that prevents experimentally proving the primacy of consciousness to society. We as scientists have to treat this as an unprovable hypothesis. Many arrive at the realization of this primacy via research and personal experiences. The materialistic model flips into a model of universal consciousness experiencing itself. The image of the snake eating its tail can be used to illustrate this principle. Our consciousness is a fractal fragment of the universal consciousness, and so is our body and all universe. There is nothing outside of universal consciousness. Space-time is a special case of universal consciousness, and in our classical material world, we are its fractal fragments experiencing life. DNA makes a single coherent integrated system between our body and our mind, and it connects the higher mind and our physical mind. The coherence in DNA structure is the key to telepathy. Since DNA participates in our thinking, our culture and experience imprints on DNA, and our memories are actually stored in the DNA structure. Many factors of modern life disrupt the coherence in DNA. Discordance in our lifestyle is the main factor that inhibits telepathy. Discordance in our lifestyle is the main factor that inhibits telepathy. This specifically includes chemicals, discordant electromagnetic waves, discordant cultural messages, fear and disagreements in society, and even genetic discordance. One huge factor is that we are programmed for survival, and much of our DNA program is keyed to survival. Non-speaking autistic telepaths are often shielded from cultural fears, not heavily influenced by social programming, and are supported by caregivers who help maintain their well-being. The same relates to Aboriginal telepaths, who are separated from civilization, live in nature, harmonious with nature. There is a direct connection between the culture, ego, and the structure of DNA. Our culture requires extreme separation and trains extreme separation between the individual and society, and between the individual and nature. It requires precision, quick reaction, and decision-making. These are all properties of the physical mind, and they all require certainty. So the demand for certainty is imprinted in our DNA. Yet telepathy and other psychic gifts require uncertainty and an intuitive state of mind, which corresponds to the delocalized state of electrons and protons in DNA and surrounding water. Meditation techniques introduce altered states where the brain oscillates between the conscious state and the dream state. This shifts the balance from localization to delocalization in the positions of electrons and protons in DNA. The delocalization in DNA unites the electrons in electron clouds and protons in proton wires. Therefore, telepathy is an oscillation process between uncertainty and certainty. To send a message, the person has to be specific in defining the message, but then go into an altered state, send the message, and the other person has to go into an altered state and receive the message. This duality can be subtle, but both states are necessary. Certainty is needed for sending and receiving, and also the uncertainty is needed for delocalization and remote transmission. This is nicely illustrated by dolphins who have a split brain, and half of the brain sleeps while the other half of the brain is awake. So they exist simultaneously in the sleep and wake states. And this is a perfect state for a telepath as well. Autistic telepaths likely possess distinctive genetic sequences that enhance their telepathic abilities. This telepathic ability is likely the next step in human evolution. This evolutionary step was predicted by Blavatsky 137 years ago. The research of alien hybridization program is best documented by John Mack. Although there are many personal accounts, the genetic evidence is missing. I suggested that it would be possible using genetic analysis to observe modern genetic insertions by aliens in human families. I looked at recent genetic insertions in families containing 2 parents and at least 1 child. In classical genetics, in classical Mendelian inheritance, the child inherits exactly 50% of their DNA from each parent, with no additional insertions. I analyzed 3 families from public databases and discovered in 2 families large insertions, which I called non-parental inheritance. These insertions weren't present in either of the parents. The insertions weren't single markers, but several markers in a row, making it very unlikely to be an artifact of genotyping. I conclude that this is likely a trace of genetic manipulation by the aliens. This would be the recent insertion of DNA into the child, and this DNA is not present in either parent. I would like to conclude with an ecological message about our collective biofield. Our DNA is integral to the biofield of the whole planet biosphere, and we are connected in one vibrational network. Modifications of plant and animal DNA are already going on fully, and modifications of human DNA are technically possible, and they are not prohibited in all countries. Most likely the genetic modification of humans is also happening currently, and this happens without understanding all the vibrational consequences. Vibrational literacy and ecology are super important because it is important to protect our genome and keep our DNA coherent. Arbitrary modification of the DNA sequence without understanding the vibrational consequences could have very strong detrimental effects on the vibrational health of the whole civilization. So, discovery, understanding, and collective awareness of the collective vibrational DNA ecology are needed. In conclusion, I would like to thank my collaborators Richard Alan Miller, Ivan Savelyev, Michael Rempel, Oksana Poletsky, and others. I thank Stanley Krippner, Rupert Sheldrake, and Dean Redin for support and comments. All my publications are available as full text on dnaresonance.org/p, and I thank the organizers for the invitation to speak and everyone for listening.